There's a lot of different possibilities for what a Wizards starting lineup could look like next year. And with that being said, Abdullah and I are going to try to figure out what might be the best lineup for opening day and how that's going to change throughout the year. All that and more here on Locked On Wizards.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
DC family, this is Locked On Wizards, where you're part of our family. We thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm one of your co-hosts here, Ben Strober. Cover all things DC Sports for 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. Check me out on my socials at Strober Sports. Alongside, as always, it's Abdullah Ayyubi, the DC Sports content creating savant. Check him out on his socials. Host of the DMV Sports Zone page. AB, Terry deal got done yesterday, man. I know you and I are both psyched about that. Probably more psyched than anything we could be thinking about Wizards basketball at the moment, but man, finally Terry McLaurin got a deal done.
Yeah, our boy Scary Terry finally locked in. I'm happy the deal's done. Now we can focus on football. Yeah, we were busy for that hour or two, man. DC Sports was up.
Oh, it was so awesome. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, today we got an action-packed episode for you of Locked On Wizards. We're going to try to figure out what the best possible starting lineup looks like for this Wizards team. And to put it light right now, the starting lineup is going to change so many times throughout the season. It's going to look completely different than it does on opening night, than it does a quarter through the season, than it does post-All-Star break, than it does post-trade deadline. The lineup is going to change so much throughout the year. Then you got some guys on the two-way contracts who could, maybe fit their way into the starting lineup, like Tristan Vucevic, but they only can cap out at 50 games. So it's going to get crazy. It's going to be tough to follow at times this upcoming season, AB, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned the veterans, CJ. There's a lot of speculation. A lot of fans are saying you got to start Tre Johnson right away, but maybe him coming off the bench is good for his development. That's something that we definitely have to get into.
Yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are proponent that Tre Johnson needs to play 30 minutes per game early on in his NBA career, and I don't agree with that at all. I think Johnson, even though he looked pretty polished compared to maybe some other guys offensively throughout the summer league, I think playing behind a guy like CJ McCollum, who's going to be 34 this year, he's been there, done that around the league, been one of the better scorers in the league at one point in his career. He is the perfect player for Tre Johnson to play behind. And first of all, when you look at it this way, what the Wizards are trying to accomplish this year is not winning basketball games. If you want to build yourself for the future, one, by securing that top 8 pick at some point in this draft, but if you want to stack up even more assets, because the Wizards are likely going to aim to do that this year with all the financial flexibility that opens up following the Jordan Poole trade that happened a couple months ago now, you want to have your veterans like CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton out there giving you quality minutes, showcasing themselves for potential contending teams. And I know when we talked to Greg Finberg last week, he said it's going to be interesting to see what the market is for those guys because of the money involved, if they're going to be able to trade guys like that. I know Middleton, especially with the $33 million player option that he opted into, that might make him a little more difficult to move. But still, with that being an opportunity to move those guys to a contending team for anything really, second-round picks, if you're able to get a first somehow, maybe you get a couple of young players or assets in return. That's what you're looking for here if you're Washington, especially for guys that are on their way out. You're not going to have here likely after this year because the expiring deals that these guys are on, which make it a lot easier for them to move as well. Then you want some young guys to come take their place, and then you play those guys post-trade deadline as well. So that's why I think C.J. McCollum is absolutely a guy that you're going to see early, and you're going to see him often throughout the year. Chris Middleton as well. So if I had to lock up two dudes for the starting lineup, I'd find it very hard to believe that McCollum and Middleton do not start on opening night for this team.
So do you think Middleton's at the 3 for you, and then you put George at the 4, or you put Bilal at the 3, Middleton at the 4?
I think Middleton will play the 4 with Bilal playing the 3. And I know there's a strong argument you could make for Keyshawn George.
I was about to say, Ben, that's your boy.
I know, man. It hurts me to say it. I think Keyshawn George is going to be great, and I think he's going to excel coming off the bench, kind of like he did last year. And George is going to get plenty of opportunities to start games this year. I'm not worried about that. I think he will start plenty of games here in year number 2. But, Middleton only played in 14 games for this Wizards team last year, started in all those games, so I don't expect that role to change. And the Wizards were actually 6-8 in the games that he was playing for last year, so that is interesting of note. I'm not saying that sample size is really something that you could look at and be like, hey, if he's on the floor, they're going to be pretty good next year. That's not going to be the case. They're going to space out the minutes the way they feel is best. I was going back and actually looking at the logs, Abdullah, for the way, how they were distributing minutes throughout the season. And if you look later in the year, the way they were distributing minutes later in the game, you could see where the ethical tank came into play. You had guys like Jordan Poole who were not even sniffing the fourth quarter of games late in the season. And I think that was strategic. And you might even see that early on in the year with McCollum and Chris Middleton, because you're not worried about seeing those guys play down the stretch in big moments. You and I talked about this the other day. You want to see Tre Johnson get some opportunities with the basketball in his hands and the game on the line. You don't want CJ McCollum out there putting up a game winner to win the game. I mean, obviously, you want them to be competitive, so if it happens, it happens. But if you're in that situation, you'd hopefully want to see one of your young guys come through in the end. So I would expect McCollum and Middleton to get plenty of minutes, but not late in games, most likely. I feel like if they're competitive for the first 3 quarters of the game, you might see the lineups drastically change for the fourth quarter, be all youth-oriented.
What do you think about the lineup, Ben? And this is probably post-trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
You put Vooch at the 4 and Sarr at the 5. That's like a twin tower, 7-footers in the front court. You think that's too much?
I mean, I think if you're gonna run that lineup, you might as well just put Vucevic at the 5 and then have Alex Sarr play the 4, because that's what everybody wants, right? Alex Sarr at the 4. It probably seems like a better fit. And I think Vooch is actually better fit to be the 5 than Alex Sarr is at this point. I think Vooch can get after it a little bit more on the glass than Alex Sarr proved to do last year. And offensively, Vucevic has a ton of skills that actually would, represent himself very well at the NBA level as a 5. And then that would allow Alex Sarr to space the floor a little bit more and maybe play the game that people think he can play. So if that lineup comes into fruition at some point in the year, which I do expect to happen, I think you'd have Sarr playing the 4.
Yeah, I remember that was a talk of the town where people were saying that Sarr is best fitted at the 4. But like you mentioned, Vucevic has the offensive game. I think one thing that people were harping on him was his effort. Defensively wasn't the best, but maybe he got better this offseason. That 7-foot frame, he can definitely use it to his advantage. And again, I always mention a second round pick that just we haven't seen been this productive in a while. I always mention Thomas Satoransky, and he did some things here in DC, but we have a really good guy in Tristan Vucevic who was in that Bilal Coulibaly draft. So I'm hoping he can take advantage of the opportunities that he gets this upcoming year.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see him and Jameer Watkins, 2 of the 3 guys that you have on the 2-way contract who max out at 50 games. I think both those guys, when they get their opportunities at the NBA level, are going to be super impactful, especially Jameer Watkins. It's going to be really interesting to see how he fits into the lineup. Most likely post-trade deadline is kind of when you would see a lot of him, kind of like how you saw Vucevic play a lot down the stretch last year. You probably see something similar with Jameer Watkins this year, because presumably you would have him come off the wing. Maybe you'd have him and George or Bilal on the floor at the same time. Man, that would be a nasty defensive duo right there. I don't know what it would look like scoring-wise, depending on the personnel that you have out there. Maybe you run them in a lineup where you have Watkins and Bilal kind of intertwined at the 3 and the 4, Tre, Bub, and then Sarr at center, or Vuk at center, whoever is in at the time. And Marvin Bagley is going to find himself playing probably decent minutes off the bench, not a ton. But, the Wizards don't have a lot of depth at center, so getting him back this year was interesting. And I'm sure they'll try to showcase him as much as possible as well, because they might try to pull the old thing where they traded him last year at the deadline, they re-signed him, and they try to trade him again. You never know. You just never know, because the Wizards are definitely going to be super active at the trade deadline this next coming season. That's, a non-negotiable, really.
Do you think they're going to be more active compared to last season?
It's going to be interesting, because with the financial flexibility that they do have at the moment, they could really take on some bad contracts here. And I haven't really gone through and done the research to see who's on a bad contract, but that maybe will come to light as the season goes on. We'll hear about teams who are trying to move off certain players who either They don't like the contract they have him right there. They're a contending team that doesn't have a role for him, kind of like how we saw Middleton get moved from the Bucks last year before the postseason to the Wizards. I don't know. Maybe we'll see a situation like that, and the Wizards will be able to get assets in return, kind of like how A.J. Johnson, who was a former first-round pick, came over in that deal because of how bad the money was in terms of the Middleton deal. I think that's what you're looking for here if you're the Wizards, because if you're unable to move Chris Middleton or CJ McCollum because of the money involved with those deals, then you better hope that you're able just to take on some bad contracts here, get a first back, get a couple second rounders, maybe get some other young pieces that were drafted in the early rounds of the past couple of years. That's what's really intriguing about this Wizards team, because there are dudes that aren't even on our radar right now that may be playing significant minutes for this team. If you were a Wizards fan last year, you had no idea that A.J. Johnson would eventually be playing significant minutes for the Washington Wizards, and that Chris Middleton will be part of that deal. You could have never imagined that possibility. But the NBA is just super unpredictable. The trade deadline, super unpredictable. And the Wizards are kind of just one of those teams right now where you just never know who's going to suddenly end up in a Wizards uniform. It was a culture shock for me to see Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton in a Wizards uniform on the floor at the same time. It's crazy.
And on top of that, at one point, Kelly Olynyk was a Wizard too. So you put all that together.
Thank God we didn't have to see him.
I have to say, Ben, I don't know. Speaking of lineups, I don't know if you remember, but when Scott Brooks put that 3-guard lineup against the Philadelphia 76ers in that first, I just get nightmares from it. I could never forget about that.
Oh my God! So the only thing that would have been interesting for me with Kelly Olynyk playing here is what would the reception have been like? Would he get booed on his own floor? Do you think? Would there be enough?
Would there be enough people in the crowd to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think people would boo him just to boo him, but it'd be a little bit weird for people having to root for Kelly Olynyk. But ultimately, that didn't become a issue in the long run.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about that.
So there's that to look at. So I went through some of the lineup logs for last year. Did that tell us anything about potentially future lineups for this team in 2025? We will tell you that next year on Locked On Wizards. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's their 401k, property, or investments. When you don't have the full picture, you end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you're putting off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data, and get smart categorization for your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a single spreadsheet. One thing that surprised me about Monarch Money is that I was able to identify that I wasn't saving as much as I thought. Monarch helps you notice an inefficient investment allocation and discover your forgotten 401ks from your past jobs. One way I'm using it is by maximizing my investments and increasing my savings rate by easily reviewing finances with my partner and keeping a clear view of my financial health week to week and in the long term. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA. So I went through some of the lineup logs from last year, Abdullah, just to kind of get a sense of where we were. So the highest amount of minutes played for a five-man lineup last year, in 17 games played with 208 total minutes, we had Kuzma, Poole, Coulibaly, Sarr, and Bub. So, all right, so you got 3 of 5 that are still with this team, and thank God Kyle Kuzma is not part of that, because I'm sure you know who was taking most of the shots in that lineup there, and that's kind of why their net rating was a minus 34.5, one of the lowest right there, and that's the lineup that played the most. So it shows you that if the Wizards
minus 34.5, holy.
If the Wizards were trying to lose games last year, which they were, they did a pretty good job of it by running that lineup out there. They were not efficient at all. Not efficient at all. The second highest lineup in terms of minutes played, I did 107. Poole, Coulibaly, Sarr, Carrington, and George. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because take Jordan Poole out of the equation, slot in Tre Johnson. That's a lineup that you might see a lot of in 2025. And that lineup in particular, wasn't good in terms of net rating, and I don't know, not really any lineups were good in net rating for the Wizards last year because of how bad they were. The only ones that were positive were lineups that played in one game for like 5 minutes together, so that sample size doesn't really equate to what we're talking about. But think about it this way: if you have Tre Johnson who slots in the position of Jordan Poole, or kind of switches around because Bub Carrington would be the one, Tre Johnson would be the two. With that lineup out there, I think that shows that they have a little bit more possibility to flash some more efficiency, especially later on in the year, because then you could have the lineup where maybe you have Keyshawn starting at the 4 at some point, or just getting minutes at the 4, where Bilal is playing at the 3, and then you have Tre and Bub as your backcourt, and then Sar rounding things out as your center. I think if Wizards fans could have it their way opening night, that would be the starting lineup. Do you agree?
Yeah, I very much agree with you there. I think a lot of Wizards fans they want to see the young guys play, and I think you always go back to the whole idea of you want to maximize the value of CJ and Chris Middleton and these vets, but you also want to say, hey, we want Tre Johnson to have a shot at winning Rookie of the Year. We saw last year Alex Sar, the amount of minutes that he got, he could even finish top 3, which was absurd. But I think Tre Johnson, will he crack that starting lineup a month in or 2 months in his NBA rookie year? We'll have to see. I wanted to ask you, Ben, do you think Cam Whitmore gets a crack at the starting lineup throughout the year?
Definitely at some point. I think the lineup is just going to be so volatile in the way it changes around and what combinations they try that it's going to change just because, well, just because really is the best way to put it. They want to try different things, and it's not really going to be because one person is even more deserving or one person is going to give them a better chance to win. I mean, think about a night where, I don't know, let's say Bilal Coulibaly has some kind of injury again. Hopefully not, but let's say he is out.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, like, if he's out at some point in the year, then you have an open spot at the 3. You go to Keyshawn George, you go to Cam Whitmore in that situation. If that's the case, and maybe they want to evaluate both, they would alternate who they'd have starting, who they'd have coming off the bench. And you might see that later on in the year because if they go to a lineup where Bilal and Keyshawn are playing at the 3 and the 4, or vice versa, I don't know, you're playing with a pretty small-ish lineup at that point, so maybe you could see a time where you have Bilal and Whitmore in the starting lineup, or Keyshawn and Whitmore in the lineup at the same time. I feel like there's a lot of possibilities for where this thing can go. Justin Champagnie is a guy that you also can't forget about as well. I don't know if he will start games for this team at some point. He could. He was one of the more efficient players on this entire basketball team last year, so I suppose he'll probably get his opportunities.
Will Riley, Ben, that's a guy we haven't talked about that much because of the amount of abundance of talent in the wing.
Yeah, I think Will Riley's not going to play a lot, especially early on in the season. I think that ramps up as it goes on. Will he get a chance to start a game for this team? I don't know. I feel like the possibility of him starting, there'd have to be a lot that happens. I think there'd have to be some injuries. There'd have to be some major shakeups in the rotation for that to happen. But I think Riley will get his opportunities as the year goes on.
I think he's going to spend a lot of time in the G League along with Jameel Watkins. My question is, Ben, do you think any of those guys have a shot of moving up from that 2-way contract to a standard contract like what the Wizards did with Justin Champagnie, or you don't see that happening this year?
Maybe with Vuk, honestly.
At all. Yeah, I could see that. Because, again, I think his talent is just very untapped. Last year, we saw him with inconsistent minutes. There were games where Rashawn Holmes got a lot of his minutes, and I'm just thinking, if we're already losing, why not go out there and let him ball out? And there were games last year, I think the Miami Heat game, he played really good as well at the end of the regular season. So, when given opportunities, I would say Vucevic produces, and I'm not saying he's going to be the starting caliber center, the starting caliber power forward, whatever it is. But if you can find a way for him and Sar to play off each other and complement each other really well, that could be really, really effective for years to come.
Yeah, there's just so many ways they can go with this lineup, and that's what's going to be really exciting. If you're a Wizards fan and you're worried about them not winning a bunch of games because they won't, obviously, and you think, why would I even bother watching? This is the reason. Right here. You're going to see a lot of different possibilities of lineups. You're going to see a ton of different guys play in different, not different systems, but playing in completely different roles. You're going to see guys that are going to shift their position at some point in the year. You're going to see situations where players that you might have not expected to be on the floor at the same time will. I feel like there's just going to be so many different shakeups to the way the lineup looks that it's going to keep it interesting every single night. If you see a different lineup all the time, it's something to look for. How do certain guys work with other players? How does somebody look at the 3 as opposed to the 4? How does Alex Sar look at the 4 instead of the 5? That's what I'm interested in seeing because you might find out some things that tell you what you need to know for the future a couple years down the road.
Yeah, if Corey Kispert might even find a way to manage himself in the starting lineup. I mean, he's still on the roster, but yeah, last year we saw a lot of different combinations of starting lineups, but I think this year it's going to be even more because again, with the abundance of talent, the wing position, guard, I think the addition of Tre Johnson, eventually down the season, you're going to be like, this is the guy that I want to take the most shots on this team. Bob Carrington year 2, Alex Sarr, a lot of expectations put on him. This aggressive, potential top 5 center in this league, defensively is only going to get better. And I think with the addition of Cam Whitmore only trading 2 second-round picks, a brand new, fresh start for him. I can't wait to see how he goes out there and plays in front of his hometown team. And you put all that together, it's going to be a fun season. And we always mention it. It's not going to be a lot of winning. I still expect 20-plus wins. But at the end of the day, you'll see the guys that will be here for the long run.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. All these young pieces, they have 12 guys under the age of 24 years old. This is what you're looking for. You're trying to see meaningful development. I love the way Greg Finberg put that the other day because there's developing as in winning games, but are you seeing the development that's going to actually benefit you long term? Like Alex Sarr polishing his game offensively, Bilal becoming a much better three-point shooter. That's what real development looks like and what will lead to more wins for a team that's trying to compete for a playoff spot. All right, when we come back, do we project guard or center will be a bigger need for the Wizards in next year's NBA draft? We'll tell you that next. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to LockedOnPodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's LockedOnPodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. Guard or center in the 2026 NBA draft, there's going to be a lot of debates about that, I'm sure, because there were a lot of Wizards fans that were proponent of, hey, why didn't we take a big man in this year's draft? And, my rebuttal to that is strategic. This team is trying to find itself in a position where they have the ability to pick in the draft next year. How do you do that? By having a glaring hole on the roster, and that's going to be rebounding. They're going to be a terrible rebounding team. Unless Alex Sarr magically pulls 12 rebounds out of the air every single game and just completely flips the script from what people say about he doubles his totals from last year, they're going to struggle getting boards, and they're going to have small lineups out there at times. That's just going to be the biggest problem for this team. With that being said, AB, do you think they'll have a bigger problem, though, at point guard than center? What do you think?
I think the talent that you have at the guard position is way more than what you have at the center position. But I also wanted to ask you, Ben, you brought up the fact that, hey, they made it a glaring hole on purpose. But do you think they also did it, the front office did it for putting some expectations on Alex Sarr saying, yo, you got to go out there and be that dominant dude and get those rebounds. 12 rebounds a game, it would be quite a drastic improvement. But Alex Sarr needs to be having the most rebounds on this team at the end of the season. He needs to be averaging the most. There's just no excuse when you're that tall. But I think Tre Johnson, AJ Johnson, Bub Carrington, that's a good amount of talent there. I think there's going to be more need of that center position. But I also have the prediction of Alex Sarr is going to have that year 2 jump, and you don't really have to go out there and draft that center in the upcoming draft. And with the likes of AJ DeBonza and Nathan Met, there's a lot of talent that I would tap in, especially if Cam Whitmore isn't that guy that you thought you could trade it for, even though you didn't give up that much, or if Bilal Coulibaly doesn't take the year 3 jump offensively. Those are the guys that I would target rather than a center, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from on that. And, we've gotten a lot of comments over the past couple of days saying, we need to, hit the brakes on some of these conversations about Bub Carrington because he needs a ton of time to develop. He was a little bit more, he only played a year of college, and then he kind of gets thrown into this fire that is a really, really poor Wizards team and plays significant minutes early on in his career. And now he's going to have his role completely changed, and I completely hear and I understand everyone bringing that up. With that being said, what you want out of your true point guard is just things that I don't know if we're going to see it from Bub Carrington. I'm giving him a chance. This is a prove-it year for him to do so. Because if he's unable to break down defenses and get to the rim, get to the free throw line in year number 2, then I'm not sure you could have a lot of expectations that he's ever going to be that kind of player. You have to really see him flash at that position. And with all the guard talent that's upcoming in next year's draft, for me, if you don't really feel like Bub Carrington is your point guard of the future, you don't feel like he belongs in the starting lineup long term, that'd be okay. I mean, if you have Bub Carrington as a guy that comes off the bench as more of a 2 guard behind Tre Johnson at some point, he just gives you super meaningful minutes because he's great with the basketball, not in his hands, great shooter, can play some defense as well. That'd be really good in the future as well. And then you get one of these really talented guards in the upcoming class. That might not be an opportunity you could pass on. But with that being said, the lack of depth that they have at the center position, also not really even having a true center because Alex Sarr probably better suited to play the 4. If you have the ability to draft an absolute dominant force in the paint as a center, somebody that you know is going to be a solidified rebounder at the next level, someone that's going to dominate in the painted area, that's something you have to think about as well. Hopefully the Wizards maybe will find an opportunity to establish some other picks at some point in the draft or in the future so they're able to get super talented guys at both these positions. If I had to bank on them needing one position more than the other, if I had to bet right now, I think they're going to go after a guard in next year's draft. That's what my gut tells me. I love Bub Carrington. I think he's a really, really talented player, and I think he's going to have a great career here in Washington and whatever his role is. But I do think they're going to be in the market for one of the top point guards in next year's draft.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I'm also a big fan of Bub Carrington, but this year, if he doesn't show that much improvement of being a true pure point guard, then you have to go out there, especially if you have the chance of landing Darren Peterson from Kansas. I mean, he's so freaking talented. A lot of people out there saying he's better than AJ DeBonza, who was at one point was a clear consensus number 1 pick in the 2026 draft. We'll just have to see how it all plays out, Ben. I think the backcourt of Bub and Tre, they'll definitely complement each other. We saw them, their shooting competitions not too long ago. They look like they're already developing that chemistry, and I'm excited for it. Last season, Bub playing all 82 games, the idea of him breaking so many rookie records, last game of the season, hitting the game winner. He was doing a lot of things right. We want to see him be more aggressive, get to the lane more, become a better passer. I think Alex Sarr needs to get under the basket more for Bub to find him, and we have the shooters, Keyshawn George, Corey Kispert, if he cracks the lineup. I think Bub Carrington can be that guy. We'll just have to see how it all plans out because there's so much young talent on this team that we have to evaluate all these guys at once. So could that alter his development? I don't know. We'll just have to see. But that there's no expectations. I always say that when it comes to these young guys, there's not that much expectation of winning a championship. It's just, hey, develop your game and then eventually build up those steps to prove to us why you're the starting point guard here for the future.
Yeah, and we're kind of just spitballing here when we say between guard or center because I wouldn't say anybody right now is not under the microscope as potentially being evaluated for the future of this upcoming season. That's just the kind of thing that you go through when you're in a rebuilding phase. And if the Wizards really find, someone from a small forward, the DeBonza or somebody else in this draft that they feel like is the best player available to them where they're picking, they could totally go with another wing player in this draft. I know they already have a bunch of dudes on the wing right now, but if they don't see enough from some of the guys they have in the building, you might see one of these draft picks slot in as somebody they like better. That's kind of just how these things go. So when we're talking about guard or center, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an end-all, be-all thing where next year's draft they're either taking a point guard or they're either taking a center. They're probably going to take whoever they think is the best player available, no matter what position it is. That's just where the Wizards are right now. Nobody is projected to be here long-term as of right now. That could change throughout the year, but that's what this year is for. You're going to find out who needs to be here long-term and who maybe shouldn't.
And again, we're going back to the whole idea of this is the last year where we'll give the get out of jail or get out of losing free card, whatever you want to call it. After this year coming up, there's going to be expectations for competing for a playing spot.
Absolutely. One of these things about this Wizards team this year that just gets me so excited is that everybody gets to be evaluated. Like everyone is right here on the same level to me. I don't think anybody has a leg up on anyone. I know some of the guys that we've seen already play in one season, like Alex Sarr, Bub Carrington. There's all things they need to improve on. So right now, I'm looking at everyone at the same level right here. Who's going to rise to the ranks and take over? What lineup will look the best for the Wizards? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast from. We want to thank everyone who's part of our everyday listenership here on Locked On Wizards. You guys mean the world to us, and we're going to keep things rolling as we get closer and closer to this NBA season. It's upcoming very soon. Football season starting, so that means basketball right around the corner. It's another big moment on Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only available on Fire TV. That'll do it for us here on Locked On Wizards. For my co-host Abdullah Yubi, I'm Ben Strober. Wizards Nation, we sign off.